The air conditioning unit wheezed like a fading animal in the summer heat. 3 in the morning, and I was elbow deep in Mrs. Henderson's attic, trying to resurrect her ancient HVAC system. That's the life of Nathan Brooks, owner of Brooks Climate Control, slave to broken machines and desperate homeowners who couldn't sleep without their precious cool air. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my work glove, listening to the house settle around me. 20 years in this business, and I'd learned that houses talk if you know how to listen. They whisper secrets through their walls, confess their problems through creaking floorboards and rattling pipes. What I didn't expect was to hear my own house's secrets spilling out through my phone. The call came through my Bluetooth headset while I wrestled with a corroded condensate drain. Colleen's voice, bright and musical in a way that made my stomach clench. She thought I was asleep. Hell, I should have been asleep, but Mrs. Henderson had offered triple overtime for an emergency repair, and business was business. "Liam, you're terrible," she giggled, that throaty laugh she used to save for me. "Nathan's been snoring since 9. Poor thing works so hard he's gone to the world by the time his head hits the pillow." I froze, my wrench suspended in midair. Liam Quinn, her ex-boyfriend from college, the same Liam she'd been inviting to our barbecues, our dinner parties, our anniversary celebration last month, the same Liam she claimed she needed around for closure. I know, she continued, her voice dropping to that intimate whisper that used to make me weak in the knees. "But what he doesn't know won't hurt him. Besides, you're part of my past, and he needs to accept that." I told him, "My ex will always be around, and he needs to accept it." The wrench slipped from my fingers, clattering against the metal ductwork with a sound like thunder in the confined space. I held my breath, waiting to see if she'd heard, but her conversation continued without pause. "The lake house this weekend was perfect," she purred. "Mara's at that accounting conference in Denver, right? So we'll have all the time we need. Nathan thinks I'm visiting my sister in Milwaukee." My sister-in-law lived in Phoenix. Had for the past 5 years. I sat back on my heels, the full weight of betrayal settling over me like a lead blanket. 22 years of marriage, 22 years of building a life together, of supporting her through dental hygiene school, of celebrating when she got promoted to office manager at Dr. Peterson's clinic. 22 years of believing that when she said she loved me, she meant it. "Liam, stop," she laughed again. "You're making me blush. But yes, I remember what you used to do with your tongue. Nathan's never been particularly creative in that department. That was it. The final nail in the coffin of whatever respect I'd had left for the woman I'd married." I pulled off my headset and sat in the sweltering attic, surrounded by the mechanical bones of someone else's house, feeling like my own foundation had just crumbled beneath me. But here's the thing about being in the HVAC business. You learn to fix things. You learn to diagnose problems, trace them to their source, and eliminate them with surgical precision. You learn patience, planning, and the value of having the right tools for the job. And sometimes, you learn that the best way to fix a system is to tear it down and start over. I finished Mrs. Henderson's repair in silence, my mind already working through possibilities. By the time I packed up my tools and headed home, I had the beginnings of a plan forming. Not revenge, not yet. First, I needed information, I needed evidence, and most importantly, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The house was dark when I pulled into our driveway. Colleen's car sat in its usual spot, and through our bedroom window, I could see the faint glow of her phone screen. Probably texting Liam goodnight, planning their next romantic rendezvous while her husband slept 10 feet away. I sat in my truck for a long moment, staring at the house we'd bought together 15 years ago. The house where we'd planned to raise children before the doctors told us it wasn't in the cards. The house where we'd weathered my father's passing, her mother's cancer scare, and the lean years when I was building my business from nothing. The house that apparently meant nothing to her. I pulled out my own phone and opened our shared cloud account. Colleen had insisted on it years ago. "For convenience, honey." This way we can both access our photos and documents from anywhere. What she probably hadn't counted on was her cheating photos automatically syncing to my devices. And there they were, dozens of them, uploaded just hours ago. Colleen and Liam at what looked like a luxury cabin, their bodies intertwined on a deck overlooking a pristine lake. Colleen wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, expensive stuff that definitely hadn't come from our joint checking account. Liam's hands on her body, her face glowing with a happiness I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The metadata told the story, taken last weekend while she was supposedly helping her sister move apartments. Uploaded tonight, probably while she was reliving every sordid detail with her lover over the phone. I scrolled through image after image, each one a fresh knife twist in my gut. But underneath the pain, something else was growing. Something cold and calculating and utterly focused. If Colleen wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd play to win. The first step was simple. I needed an ally. And I knew exactly where to find one. Mara Quinn answered her phone on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. Hello? Who is this? Mrs. Quinn, this is Nathan Brooks. I'm sorry to call so late, but we need to talk. It's about your husband and my wife. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of her breathing and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. I was parked at a 24-hour diner 3 towns over, far enough from home that no one would recognize my truck. I see, she said finally, her voice sharpening with understanding. And what exactly do you think we need to discuss, Mr. Brooks? I think you know, I said gently. I think you've suspected for a while now. The late nights, the mysterious trips, the way he lights up whenever Colleen's name comes up at social events. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, controlled. What kind of proof do you have? The kind that would hold up in court, I replied. Photos, call logs, hotel receipts, everything you'd need to know the truth about what's been happening behind our backs. Where do you want to meet? Smart woman. No denials, no hysterics, no wasted time on false hope. Just straight to business. I was beginning to understand why Liam had married her, and why he was such a fool for throwing it away. Rosie's Diner on Highway 47. I'll be in the corner booth wearing a blue Brooks climate control shirt. Give me 45 minutes. The line went silent, leaving me alone with my coffee and my thoughts. Through the diner's windows, I watched the occasional car drift past, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights hunting for something lost. Mara Quinn arrived exactly 45 minutes later, and I recognized her immediately, despite having met her only a handful of times at various social functions. Tall and lean, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent green eyes that missed nothing. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, no makeup, but she carried herself with a confidence that made her striking anyway. She slid into the booth across from me without preamble. Show me. I pushed my tablet across the table, already loaded with the most damning photos from the cloud account. I watched her face as she scrolled through them, looking for any sign of the devastation I'd felt when I first saw them. But Mara Quinn was made of sterner stuff than that. Her expression remained carefully neutral, though I caught the slight tightening around her eyes, the way her jaw clenched when she reached the more intimate images. When were these taken? She asked, her voice steady. Last weekend, while you were at your accounting conference in Denver. She nodded slowly. He told me he was visiting his brother in Madison, said he needed some guy time to work through some personal issues. She looked up from the tablet, meeting my eyes directly. How long have you known? About 3 hours, I admitted. I overheard a phone call tonight while I was working. They were planning another weekend getaway, talking about how neither of us suspected anything. But you do suspect? You suspected enough to check your shared accounts, to call me in the middle of the night? She leaned back in the booth, studying me with those sharp green eyes. What do you want, Nathan? Revenge? A divorce ally? Someone to help you catch them in the act? I want them to understand what it feels like to lose everything, I said quietly. I want them to experience the same humiliation, the same betrayal, the same complete destruction of everything they thought was safe and permanent in their lives. Mara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming silently on the table. When she spoke, her voice carried a hint of something dangerous. Liam thinks he's untouchable. He thinks his charm and his good looks and his family connections make him bulletproof. He's been coasting on that assumption his entire life. And Colleen thinks she's smarter than everyone else, I added. She thinks she can manipulate situations, control the narrative, make people see what she wants them to see. She's been doing it to me for years. So we take away their advantages, Mara said simply. We expose them for what they really are, in front of everyone who matters to them. We make them face consequences for once in their privileged lives. I felt a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, the first genuine smile I'd managed since discovering the truth. I like the way you think, Mrs. Quinn. Call me Mara, and I like the way you operate, Nathan. Most men would have confronted their wives immediately, made a scene, let emotion drive their decisions, but you're thinking strategically. 20 years in business teaches you patience, I said. You learn to gather all the facts before you make your move. You learn that the most effective solutions are usually the ones nobody sees coming. Mara leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. Tell me about Colleen. What does she value most? What would hurt her the most to lose? Her reputation, I said without hesitation. She's spent years building this image of herself as the perfect wife, the successful professional, the woman who has it all figured out. She's president of the dental office's social committee, organizes charity events, sits on the school board even though we don't have kids. She needs people to admire her, to see her as someone worth emulating. And Liam's the same way, Mara said thoughtfully. He works in medical device sales, spends his time schmoozing doctors and hospital administrators. His whole career depends on people trusting him, seeing him as reliable and ethical. He's always talking about his reputation, how important it is to maintain professional relationships. So we destroy their reputations, I said, systematically, methodically, and very publicly. Exactly, but we do it smart. We don't just expose the affair. We make sure everyone understands exactly what kind of people they really are. We show the community that they're liars, manipulators, people who can't be trusted in any capacity. We spent the next hour planning, sharing information about our spouses' schedules, their social circles, their professional vulnerabilities. Mara turned out to be every bit as strategic as I'd hoped, with an accountant's attention to detail and a scorned wife's motivation for thoroughness. By the time we parted ways, we had the framework of a plan that would systematically dismantle everything Colleen and Liam had built. It would take time, patience, and careful execution. But when we were finished, they'd understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything that mattered to them. As I drove home through the pre-dawn darkness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time in my marriage, I was going to be the one controlling the game. Colleen was asleep when I slipped into our bedroom, her phone face down on the nightstand, probably still warm from her late-night conversation with her lover. She looked peaceful, innocent even, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like a halo. I wondered how long that peace would last. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the oblivious husband with an expertise that surprised even me, going through the motions of our marriage while quietly gathering intelligence and laying groundwork for what was to come. Colleen made it almost too easy. She'd grown careless in her confidence, sloppy in her lies. When she announced another weekend trip to help her sister, I simply nodded and wished her a safe drive. When she came home glowing and refreshed, full of stories about apartment hunting and sisterly bonding, I listened with apparent interest while mentally cataloging every inconsistency. Meanwhile, Mara and I met regularly, always carefully, always with legitimate cover stories. She'd hired Brooks Climate Control to service the HVAC system in her home office, giving us a professional reason to spend time together. During these consultations, we refined our strategy and shared intelligence about our target's movements. "Liam's getting bolder," she reported during one of our meetings. "He started taking personal calls during dinner, claiming they're work emergencies. Last night he disappeared for 2 hours, said he had to help a colleague with a presentation." "Colleen's doing the same thing," I said, adjusting the thermostat in Mara's office while we talked. "She's been staying late at the dental office more often, supposedly working on the charity auction for the children's hospital. But Dr. Peterson mentioned to me at the hardware store that they wrapped up the auction planning weeks ago." Mara's office was a study in organized efficiency, with neat stacks of client files and a wall covered in professional certifications. Everything about her spoke of competence and attention to detail, qualities that made her the perfect partner for what we were planning. "I've been thinking about the charity auction," she said thoughtfully. "It's next month, right? The biggest social event of the year for your wife's professional circle?" "The biggest," I confirmed. "Colleen's been talking about it for months. She's wearing a new dress that cost more than my truck payment, and she's been planning her entrance like she's walking the red carpet at the Oscars." "Perfect. That's our finale. But we need to set the stage first, make sure everyone's paying attention when the curtain comes down." We started small, with carefully planted seeds of doubt in the right social circles. Mrs. Geller, my elderly neighbor who served as the unofficial town gossip network, proved to be an invaluable asset. A casual comment about how devoted Colleen was to helping her sister, delivered while Mrs. Geller and I happened to be getting our mail at the same time, was enough to get the rumor mill turning. "Oh, how sweet," Mrs. Geller had said, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I didn't know Colleen's sister lived so close. It must be nice that she can visit so often." "Actually, her sister lives in Phoenix," I said with carefully manufactured confusion. "But Colleen's been helping someone in Milwaukee. I must have misunderstood who it was." I watched Mrs. Geller's expression shift as she processed this information, filing it away for future use. Within days, I started hearing whispers at the hardware store, the coffee shop, the gas station. Nothing malicious yet, just gentle questions about Colleen's mysterious trips and the identity of her Milwaukee friend. Mara employed similar tactics in her own social circles, letting slip casual comments about Liam's new interest in weekend travel and his sudden enthusiasm for helping colleagues with their personal problems. She had a particular talent for making these observations sound concerned rather than suspicious, as if she was simply a worried wife trying to understand her husband's changing behavior. "I'm worried about him," she confided to Sarah Mitchell, the wife of Liam's biggest client, during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "He's been so stressed lately, always rushing off to help people with emergencies. I just hope he's not taking on too much responsibility for other people's problems." The beauty of our approach was its subtlety. We weren't making accusations or spreading obvious gossip. We were simply sharing our confusion and concern, letting other people draw their own conclusions. And in a town like ours, where everyone knew everyone else's business, those conclusions spread like wildfire. But our real breakthrough came when I discovered that Liam had been using his company credit card to pay for some of his romantic getaways with Colleen. Mara found the statements while organizing their financial records for tax season, and we both recognized the opportunity immediately. "He's not technically embezzling," Mara explained during one of our meetings, "but he's definitely violating company policy. Personal expenses on a corporate card, even if he pays them back later, could be grounds for termination depending on how his boss wants to handle it." "And your husband's boss is?" "Richard Morrison. He's old school, very conservative, very big on personal integrity and professional ethics. He's also married to Linda Morrison, who serves on the hospital board with several of the doctors from Colleen's clinic." The connections were falling into place like dominoes. In a small professional community, everyone was linked to everyone else through business relationships, social circles, and family ties. A scandal in one area would inevitably spread to all the others. "We need to be careful about timing," I said. If we move too fast, they might be able to contain the damage, but if we coordinate everything properly, they won't know what hit them until it's too late to recover, Mara finished. I like it, but we need one more element, something that forces them to expose themselves publicly, in front of everyone who matters. That's when I remembered the charity auction, and the plan began to crystallize. Colleen had been working on the event for months, building relationships with donors and sponsors, positioning herself as the driving force behind what was expected to be the most successful fundraiser in the hospital's history. She'd invited everyone who mattered in our social and professional circles, including Liam and Mara. What if they thought they were safe? I asked. What if they believed they'd gotten away with everything and decided to celebrate by being a little too obvious about their relationship? Mara's smile was sharp and satisfied. You're thinking of setting a trap. I'm thinking of giving them exactly what they want, an opportunity to be together publicly, to feel like they've won, and then pulling the rug out from under them when they're at their most confident. We spent the rest of that meeting working out the details, refining our approach until it was foolproof. By the time I packed up my tools and left Mara's house, we had a plan that would destroy our cheating spouse's reputation so thoroughly that they'd never recover. But first, we had to make sure they walked willingly into our trap. The setup began the following week, when I started dropping hints to Colleen about how much I was looking forward to the charity auction. I praised her organizational skills, her dedication to the cause, her ability to bring the community together for such an important event. I'm so proud of you, I told her over dinner, watching her face glow with pleasure at the compliment. This auction is going to be your crowning achievement. Everyone's going to see what an amazing woman I married. She practically preened under the attention, and I could see her mind working, probably imagining how she could use the event to spend time with Liam while basking in the admiration of our entire social circle. You're sweet, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I just want everything to be perfect. This is such an important cause, and there are going to be so many influential people there. Will Liam and Mara be attending? I asked innocently. Oh yes, they bought tickets weeks ago. Liam's company is one of our major sponsors, actually. Very generous of them. I'll bet it was generous, especially considering that Liam was probably using company funds to impress his mistress. That's wonderful, I said, squeezing her hand back. It'll be nice to see them again. We should make sure to spend some time with them during the event. Colleen's smile flickered slightly, but she recovered quickly. Of course, though I'll be pretty busy with my hosting duties. You know how these events are. I understand completely. You'll be the star of the show. And she would be, just not in the way she was expecting. The charity auction was held at the Riverside Country Club, the most prestigious venue in our small city. Colleen had transformed the ballroom into an elegant showcase, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in ivory linens and centerpieces of white roses. Silent auction displays lined the walls, featuring everything from weekend getaways to original artwork donated by local artists. Colleen herself was radiant in a midnight blue gown that hugged her curves and made her blonde hair shimmer like spun gold. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, greeting donors and sponsors, posing for photos with board members and local dignitaries. To anyone watching, she was the picture of success, a devoted wife supporting her community while her proud husband looked on. If only they knew the truth. I played my part perfectly, staying close enough to appear supportive while giving Colleen the space she needed to work the room. I made small talk with other husbands, complimented the decorations, and wrote generous checks for several auction items. To all appearances, I was exactly what I'd always been: Nathan Brooks, hardworking business owner and devoted spouse. Liam and Mara arrived fashionably late, drawing admiring glances as they made their entrance. Liam wore an expensive tuxedo that emphasized his tall, athletic frame, while Mara was stunning in an emerald green dress that brought out her eyes and showcased her elegant figure. They looked like the perfect couple. Successful, attractive, completely devoted to each other. The irony was almost too delicious to bear. I watched from across the room as Colleen's eyes found Liam, saw the way her face lit up with a joy she'd never shown for me. They were careful not to approach each other directly, but I could see the subtle signals passing between them, meaningful glances, small smiles, the kind of intimate communication that develops between lovers. "They're not even trying to hide it," Mara said softly, appearing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Look at them. They might as well be wearing signs." She was right. Colleen had positioned herself near the silent auction display, featuring a weekend at a luxury spa resort. The same resort where she and Liam had spent their most recent getaway, according to the photos I'd found. When Liam drifted over to examine the auction items, their conversation looked casual enough, but I could see the way they leaned into each other, the way Colleen's hand brushed against his arm. "Are you ready for this?" Mara asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what we were about to do. "I've been ready for weeks," I replied. "The question is whether they'll give us the opening we need." We didn't have to wait long. As the evening progressed and the champagne flowed more freely, Colleen and Liam grew bolder. They found excuses to work together on auction logistics, their heads bent close over clipboards and bid sheets. When the live auction began and Colleen took the stage as the evening's hostess, Liam positioned himself at a front table where she could see him clearly. The moment came during the bidding for a romantic dinner cruise on the river. Colleen was describing the package with obvious enthusiasm, painting a picture of moonlight on the water and intimate dining under the stars. As she spoke, her eyes kept drifting to Liam, and when someone made a particularly high bid, she actually winked at him. That was our cue. Mara and I had positioned ourselves at a table near the back of the room, with a clear view of both the stage and Liam's table. As Colleen continued her pitch for the dinner cruise, Mara stood and walked purposefully toward the front of the room. To most observers, it probably looked like she was simply moving to get a better view of the auction action. But I knew better. Mara was positioning herself for maximum impact. "Do I hear 1,500? Colleen called out, her voice bright with excitement. "This is a truly romantic package, perfect for couples who want to celebrate their love in an unforgettable setting." 2,000, Liam called out, raising his bid paddle with a confident smile. The room buzzed with appreciation for such a generous bid, but I could see the way Colleen's face flushed with pleasure. She was practically glowing as she looked down at her lover, probably imagining the two of them enjoying that romantic cruise together. 2,000 from Mr. Quinn, she said, her voice warm with approval. "Any other bidders for this wonderful romantic evening?" That's when Mara made her move. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's excellent acoustics, "I think my husband might be bidding on that cruise for someone else. He's never been particularly interested in romance." The room went quiet, sensing drama but not yet understanding its source. Colleen's smile faltered as she looked down at Mara, who was now standing directly in front of Liam's table. "I'm sorry," Colleen said, her voice uncertain. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Mara replied, her tone conversational but carrying an edge that made everyone lean forward to listen. "After all, you've been planning romantic getaways with my husband for months now. I assume this auction item is just another addition to your collection." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Colleen's face cycling through emotions, confusion, fear, anger, and finally a desperate attempt to maintain control. Liam had gone pale, his bid paddle forgotten in his hand. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Colleen said carefully, "but this is hardly the appropriate venue for personal—" "Personal what?" Mara interrupted, pulling out her phone and holding it up so everyone could see the screen. "Personal photos? Like these ones you've been sharing on your cloud account?" The photos were clearly visible even from my position at the back of the room, Colleen and Liam in passionate embraces, their bodies intertwined on the deck of a luxury cabin. The same photos that had shattered my world weeks ago were now destroying theirs in front of everyone who mattered to them. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Gasps echoed through the ballroom as people recognized what they were seeing. Phone cameras appeared as guests began documenting the scandal unfolding before them. Dr. Peterson, Colleen's boss, stood abruptly from his front row table, his face dark with anger and embarrassment. "These were taken last weekend," Mara continued, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "While I was at a conference in Denver and Nathan was working night shifts to keep his business running. Apparently, my husband and your wife decided to celebrate their affair at a luxury resort. Paid for, I might add, with his company credit card." Colleen tried to regain control, raising her hands for silence, but the damage was done. The crowd was buzzing with shock and outrage, their voices rising as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "Please," Colleen said, her voice cracking with desperation. "This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." "Explain what?" I said, rising from my chair and walking toward the front of the room. "Explain why you told me you were visiting your sister in Phoenix while you were actually having an affair with a married man? Explain why you've been lying to my face for months while planning romantic getaways with your lover?" All eyes turned to me as I approached the stage, and I felt a surge of satisfaction at the shock on Colleen's face. She'd thought I was safely oblivious, easily manipulated, too trusting to ever discover her betrayal. "Nathan," she whispered, her face pale with horror. "Please, not here. We can talk about this at home." "Home?" I laughed, the sound harsh in the silent ballroom. "You mean the home where you've been lying to me every single day? The home where you take phone calls from your lover while I'm working to support us both? The home where you plan your affairs while I sleep in the bed next to you?" Liam finally found his voice, standing up from his table with his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Look, everyone, this is getting out of hand. Maybe we should—" "Shut up," Mara said sharply, turning to face her husband with fury blazing in her green eyes. "You don't get to speak. You don't get to try to manage this situation or control the narrative. You made your choice when you decided to throw away our marriage for a woman who cares more about her reputation than her family." The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by the drama unfolding before them. I could see phones recording every moment, capturing the destruction of 2 marriages and 4 reputations for posterity. "You want to know the really pathetic part?" I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes fixed on Colleen. "She told me that her ex would always be around, and I needed to accept it. She said it was about closure, about maintaining important friendships. She made me feel like a jealous fool for being uncomfortable with their relationship." I turned to look directly at Liam, who was standing frozen beside his table like a deer caught in headlights. "And you," I continued, my voice filled with contempt. "You're supposed to be a professional, someone doctors and hospitals trust with their business. But you're using company funds to pay for affairs, lying to clients about your availability, and betraying the woman who supported your career for years." "Nathan, please," Colleen said, stepping down from the stage with tears streaming down her face. "I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can work through this together." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for over 2 decades. This woman who'd shared my bed while planning romantic getaways with another man. When I spoke, my voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely final. "You chose him," I said simply. "I choose his wife." I turned to Mara, who was watching me with something like admiration in her eyes. Without hesitation, I offered her my arm, and she took it with a smile that was both grateful and triumphant. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced to the stunned crowd, "I hope you'll continue to support the Children's Hospital. It's a worthy cause, and the kids shouldn't suffer because of 2 selfish adults who couldn't keep their marriage vows." With that, Mara and I walked out of the ballroom together, leaving behind the wreckage of Colleen and Liam's reputations and the shocked whispers of 300 guests who would never forget what they'd witnessed. Behind us, I could hear Colleen calling my name, her voice breaking with desperation and panic. But I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. The aftermath was swift and merciless. By Monday morning, the story of the charity auction scandal had spread through every professional and social circle in town. The photos Mara had displayed were circulating on social media, accompanied by detailed accounts of the public confrontation and speculation about the future of both marriages. I spent that morning at my shop, trying to focus on work while fielding phone calls from friends, family members, and curious acquaintances who wanted to hear my side of the story. My employee Sandy, a tough woman in her 50s who'd been with me for 8 years, appointed herself my unofficial guardian, screening calls, and turning away unwanted visitors. "You did the right thing," she told me during a brief lull between phone calls. "That woman was poison, Nathan. Anyone with eyes could see how she treated you, always putting you down, always acting like she was too good for this place." I appreciated the support, but my mind was elsewhere. Colleen had tried calling me 17 times since Saturday night, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to angry demands that I come home so we could discuss this like adults. I'd listened to exactly one of them before deleting the rest. The real satisfaction came from the professional consequences that were already beginning to unfold. Dr. Peterson had called me personally on Sunday morning to express his shock and disappointment about Colleen's behavior, and to assure me that she would no longer be employed at his clinic. "I can't have someone representing my practice who shows such poor judgment," he'd said, his voice heavy with regret. "The board of directors met this morning, and we were unanimous in our decision. Her termination is effective immediately." Liam's situation was even worse. Mara had called me Sunday evening to report that Richard Morrison, Liam's boss, had conducted an emergency audit of the company credit card records and discovered multiple violations of corporate policy. The romantic getaways were just the tip of the iceberg. Liam had been using company funds for expensive dinners, hotel rooms, and gifts that had nothing to do with legitimate business expenses. "He's not just fired," Mara had told me, her voice filled with grim satisfaction. "Richard is considering whether to press charges for fraud. At minimum, Liam will have to repay every penny of the unauthorized expenses, plus interest and penalties. His reputation in the medical device industry is finished." But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Rita Carmichael, Colleen's best friend and closest confidant, had apparently decided that loyalty was a luxury she could no longer afford. According to the gossip network that Mrs. Geller maintained with military precision, Rita was now telling anyone who would listen about Colleen's years of manipulation, lies, and casual cruelty toward the people who cared about her. "She's been talking about Nathan behind his back for years," Rita had reportedly told a group of women at the coffee shop, "always complaining about how boring he was, how he wasn't ambitious enough, how she deserved better than a blue-collar husband. She used to laugh about the things she could get him to believe, like he was some kind of stupid pet." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. It was one thing to know that Colleen had been unfaithful. It was another to learn that she'd been mocking me to our friends for years, turning my love and trust into a source of entertainment for her social circle. But if I'd learned anything from this experience, it was that knowledge was power, and power properly applied could reshape the world according to your will. Tuesday afternoon brought the confrontation I'd been expecting. Colleen appeared at my shop just after lunch, looking haggard and desperate in a way that would have broken my heart just weeks earlier. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smudged, and her usually perfect hair hung limp around her shoulders. "Nathan," she said, stepping through the door of my office like she was approaching a wild animal. "Thank God you're here. We need to talk." "No," I said without looking up from the invoice I was reviewing. "We don't." "Please," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But we can work through this. 22 years of marriage has to count for something. I set down my pen and looked at her directly for the first time since the auction. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of the confidence that had always been her defining characteristic. 22 years? I repeated thoughtfully. You're right, that should count for something. But apparently it didn't count for much when you were planning romantic getaways with your ex-boyfriend. It didn't count for much when you were laughing about me with your friends, or lying to my face every single day. I made a mistake, she said, stepping closer to my desk. A terrible mistake, but that's all it was. Liam was just... He reminded me of who I used to be, before responsibilities and bills and real life got in the way. It wasn't about you, Nathan. It was about me feeling young again. It was about you being selfish, I corrected. It was about you deciding that your happiness mattered more than our marriage, more than my feelings, more than the vows we made to each other. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she realized that her usual manipulation tactics weren't working. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Liam. I'll quit my job and work somewhere else. Just please don't throw away our entire marriage over one mistake. One mistake? I laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Colleen, you've been having an affair for months. You've been lying to me, stealing from our joint accounts to pay for your romantic getaways, and mocking me to our friends for years. This isn't one mistake. This is a pattern of behavior that shows exactly what kind of person you really are. That's not true, she said desperately. I love you, Nathan. I've always loved you. Liam was just a fantasy, a way to escape from the pressures of real life. But you're my husband, my partner, my best friend. Your best friend? I stood up from my chair, feeling the full weight of my anger for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Best friends don't lie to each other, Colleen. Best friends don't betray each other's trust. Best friends don't humiliate each other in front of their entire community. She flinched as if I'd struck her, but I wasn't finished. You want to know what really hurts? I continued, my voice rising with each word. It's not just the affair. It's not even the lies. It's the fact that you thought I was stupid enough to never find out. You thought I was so pathetic, so desperate for your approval, that I'd accept any explanation you gave me no matter how ridiculous it was. I never thought you were stupid, she whispered. Yes, you did. You thought I was a foolish, boring man who was lucky to have a wife like you. You thought I'd be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way, even while you were giving your best to someone else. The truth hung between us like a physical presence, undeniable and devastating. Colleen stood there in her wrinkled clothes and smudged makeup, finally understanding that the man she'd taken for granted for over 2 decades was not going to forgive, forget, or take her back. What do you want from me? She asked finally, her voice barely audible. Nothing, I said simply. I want absolutely nothing from you, Colleen. I want you to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. I want you to contact a lawyer and start divorce proceedings. And I want you to understand that the life you threw away for a few romantic weekends with your ex-boyfriend is never coming back. She stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. When she spoke, her voice was filled with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. You're not the man I married, she said. No, I agreed. I'm not. The man you married was a fool who believed that love and loyalty meant something to you. The man you're looking at now knows exactly what you're worth. She left without another word, and I watched through the window as she sat in her car for several minutes, probably crying, probably trying to figure out how her carefully controlled world had collapsed so completely. I felt no satisfaction in her tears, no joy in her pain. But I felt something infinitely more valuable. Peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where she was or who she was with. I wasn't analyzing her words for hidden meanings or trying to decode her moods. I was free. The final chapter of this story played out over the following weeks, as Colleen and Liam discovered that actions have consequences, even for people who'd spent their lives believing they were immune to such mundane concerns. Colleen found herself effectively blacklisted from her profession as word of the scandal spread through the tight-knit community of dental practices. Her reputation for manipulation and poor judgment made her unemployable in any position that required trust or discretion. Liam fared even worse. The fraud investigation revealed a pattern of financial misconduct that went back years, and he ended up facing both civil and criminal charges. His medical device career was over, his professional relationships destroyed, and his financial future mortgaged to pay legal fees and restitution. But perhaps the most satisfying development was the way their affair crumbled under the pressure of real-world consequences. Without the thrill of secrecy and the excitement of forbidden romance, they quickly discovered that they had nothing substantial to build a relationship on. Within a month of the charity auction, they were blaming each other for the disaster that had befallen them both. As for Mara and me, we found that our partnership in revenge had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful. We'd started as allies united by betrayal, but we discovered that we genuinely enjoyed each other's company, respected each other's intelligence, and shared similar values about loyalty, honesty, and the importance of keeping one's word. "You know," she said one evening as we sat on her back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, "I think we might be the real winners in all of this." "How do you figure?" I asked, though I suspected I knew what she meant. "We got rid of two people who didn't deserve us," she said simply. "And we found each other in the process. That seems like a pretty good trade to me." I raised my beer bottle in a mock toast to getting exactly what we deserved. She clinked her bottle against mine, her green eyes sparkling with humor and something warmer. To getting exactly what we deserved. The last I heard, Colleen was working as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic 2 towns over, living in a studio apartment, and driving a 10-year-old Honda with a dented bumper. Liam had moved back in with his parents while he waited for his court date, his BMW repossessed, and his professional wardrobe sold to pay legal bills. They'd both learned, finally and definitively, that some mistakes can't be undone, some betrayals can't be forgiven, and some consequences can't be avoided no matter how charming or manipulative you think you are. As for me, I was exactly where I belonged, building something real with someone who understood the value of loyalty, honesty, and keeping your promises. Someone who would never take my love for granted or treat my trust as a joke to share with friends. Someone who chose me back.